I had always thought my relationship with Gracie, my mother-in-law, was the epitome of harmony. She and Vic, my father-in-law, had been childhood sweethearts, and their bond seemed unbreakable. But one day Gracie grabbed my hand, tears streaming down her face. "Liv, your father-in-law. He's been keeping a mistress outside for years. They even have a child. I've been in the dark for over a decade, Liv. A complete fool for everyone to laugh at." Bitterness welled up in my chest, and my voice cracked. "Mom, actually, Ethan has someone too. He even bought her an entire building." We clung to each other, sobbing uncontrollably. After what felt like an eternity, Gracie wiped her tears and sniffed. "Men are as reliable as a pig climbing a tree. Liv, I'm done with that old man. Mom, wherever you go, I'll go. I'm done with Ethan too." 1. Gracie and I had an unspoken agreement. We would leave, but we needed a plan. After much deliberation, we decided that faking our deaths would be the cleanest way out. Gracie had lived a sheltered life, marrying Vic when she was just 20 and dedicating herself to being a wife and mother. She was naive in many ways, but when it came to acting, she had potential. "Liv, this is all I've got. How do we start?" she asked, handing me a file of documents. My eyes widened in disbelief. $2 billion. Gracie, the quintessential golden girl, had assets that could make anyone swoon. Compared to her, I was pitiful with a mere $30 million. Still, it was more than enough for a few lifetimes. "Mom, I've got a plan." Gracie trusted me wholeheartedly, and I immediately set things in motion. Vic's birthday was just 2 days away, and we planned a grand celebration on a yacht. It was novel, luxurious, and most importantly, an easy place to stage our exit. With time running short, I outsourced all the event planning. As for the spark to set our plan ablaze, it had to be her. If Scarlett had the audacity to accept a building from Ethan, she would have to bear the consequences. On the day of the party, Gracie was a vision in her Chanel suit, her flawless complexion betraying none of the turmoil beneath. Vic stood beside her, exuding the composed charm of a man who had aged gracefully. He caught the attention of several wealthy women at the party. Guests milled about, laughing and chatting, while Gracie and I exchanged a subtle glance from across the room. We were perfectly in sync. Ethan appeared at my side, wrapping an arm around my waist. "Liv, you look stunning tonight." The warmth of his hand sent a shiver through me, and I instinctively stepped away. "You're looking sharp yourself," I replied, forcing a smile. "So sharp you've attracted quite a crowd of admirers. Their stares are practically burning holes in me." The women around us cast longing glances at Ethan. He pressed his chin against the top of my head. "They can look all they want, but I belong to you." Suppressing a wave of nausea, I met his gaze with a hollow smile. "Too bad some people are bound to be disappointed." "Ethan," I said, my voice icy, "that building you bought wasn't cheap. Scarlett must mean a great deal to you." Ethan stiffened, his arm dropping to his side. "It's not what you think. It was just for work." "I understand," I replied, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "You'd spend a fortune for love, wouldn't you?" Ethan opened his mouth to explain further, but I patted his arm dismissively. "I'm going to check on Gracie. Enjoy yourself." As Scarlett approached him, I took the opportunity to slip away and join Gracie. She gripped my hand and led me to the deck. "Liv, are you ready?" "Yes, everything's set. Don't worry." We shared a conspiratorial smile just as Scarlett appeared. "Olivia. Oh, and Mrs. Hall, you're here too." Scarlett greeted us with a saccharine smile. Gracie's expression hardened. "Miss White, you had the nerve to charm my son into buying you a building, and now you dare to show your face in front of me?" Scarlett paled. "Mrs. Hall, I didn't. Ethan did it of his own accord." Slap. Gracie's hand landed squarely across Scarlett's face. Scarlett froze in shock. I sneered, my voice dripping with disdain. Ethan, Do you think you're a chicken clucking all day? My mother-in-law only gave birth to one son, Ethan. Who do you think you are to call him that? Scarlett, do your fans know how shameless you are behind the scenes? Scarlett's face contorted with rage as she lunged at me, ready to retaliate. In the ensuing scuffle, Gracie and I grappled with her, and in a moment of chaos I stumbled backward, toppling over the railing and plunging into the sea. Liv! Gracie screamed, reaching out to grab me, but her hands found only air. Scarlett stood frozen in horror. I didn't mean to. It wasn't me. Gracie's grief turned to fury. If it wasn't you, then who was it? Give me back my daughter-in-law. She grabbed Scarlett by the arms, dragging her toward the railing. Scarlett, panicked, shoved her away with all her strength. Behind us, a voice rang out, raw with desperation. Mom! 2. Pandemonium erupted aboard the yacht as guests searched frantically for us. Meanwhile, I was pulled from the water by a rescue team. Gracie knelt beside me, trembling. Liv, are you okay? I'm fine, Mom, I reassured her, wrapped in a thick blanket. From a distance, the chaos on the yacht faded into the night as we were whisked away. Finally, we breathed a sigh of relief. Once we reached the safety of the shore, we sat on a plush sofa, watching the news unfold on TV. The headlines were sensational. Tragedy strikes at the Hall family's birthday bash. Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law lost at sea. On the screen, Scarlett's face was pale, her eyes red and brimming with tears. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't push them, they fell on their own. She sobbed as the police escorted her away. Ethan and Vic appeared grim, their faces etched with worry. Ethan in particular looked utterly drained. I rolled my eyes and switched off the TV. Drama queens, I muttered. Gracie chuckled softly and we leaned back, ready to embrace our new lives. Gracie patted the back of my hand, her voice low but firm. Don't worry. They're just putting on a show. Once Vic and I are dead, those two will probably be overjoyed. Just wait and see. Scarlett won't stay locked up for long. And when that happens, Victor's mistress will surface too. I nodded. Gracie and I were of one mind. Sure enough, 3 days later, Scarlett was released. The media swarmed to cover the story. Due to insufficient evidence, Scarlett was set free, and Ethan personally went to pick her up. Reporters surrounded them, cameras flashing, microphones extended in every direction. Mr. Crane, there are rumors that Scarlett had a dispute with the two women before the incident. Is this linked to the fall into the sea? Is this your way of reconciling with Scarlett, Mr. Crane? What's the latest update? Has the Crane family abandoned the search? Ethan's expression was dark as he responded curtly. Everything will be addressed in the official statement. Watching the video, I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. Ethan, you truly are despicable. This woman means the world to you, doesn't she? So much so that you can't even bring yourself to reprimand her, let alone hold her accountable. Instead, you shield her. Disgusted, I slammed the laptop shut and made up my mind. Gracie and I packed our bags and embarked on a world tour. Having money really does make everything different. To ensure our safety, we even opened an offshore account. No one would ever be able to trace us. We indulged in the high-life luxury hotels, fine dining, endless parties. It was a carefree existence. Meanwhile, the Crane family refused to hold a funeral as long as no bodies were found. This sparked wild speculation across social circles. Was the Crane family's missing daughter-in-law and mother-in-law really dead? Rumors flew everywhere, but I remained unbothered. Every day I basked in the sun, strolled along beaches, and even admired the handsome men passing by. Life couldn't get any better. After months of this lifestyle, I began to feel a bit restless. Gracie and I decided to start a bed and breakfast by the coast. Running a small business, meeting new people, and earning money, it was a refreshing change of pace. Gradually, the news reports about us faded away, and it seemed we were finally free from the public's gaze. I thought life could continue like this, simple and peaceful. Gracie seemed to share the sentiment. We grew so close that we started referring to each other as mother and daughter. Occasionally we'd visit bars, hoping for chance encounters with charming strangers. Gracie, ever open-minded, would nudge me and point out potential suitors. "You've got to move on, Liv," she said one day, her tone playful but sincere. "You're still so young. Don't waste your life on Ethan, that crooked tree." Her words warmed my heart. "Mom, I know. If the right person comes along, I won't say no. But for now, I'm happy just spending my days with you." "Speaking of which," I teased, "I've noticed Mr. Huang from next door has been paying you a lot of attention. Could it be time for your second spring?" Gracie gave an exaggerated roll of her eyes, her expression half joking, half embarrassed. "Oh, he's decent looking, but he's no Victor. Honestly, ever since I found out what a spineless cucumber he's become, I haven't given him a second thought." I felt a jolt of surprise. "Mom, don't tell me you're still hung up on Vic." "Please," she scoffed, her tone dripping with disdain. "We were childhood sweethearts, sure, and we've been through a lot together. But after everything that's happened, I can't even look at him the same way anymore." She paused, then added with a mischievous glint in her eye, "That said, the younger guys these days aren't bad at all. I might just give one of them a try." Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. It seemed that, no matter the age, the allure of youth was universal. "Well, that's easy to arrange," I said, snapping my fingers. "I heard the bar down the street just hired some new eye candy. They're even doing cosplay themes. How about we check it out tonight?" Gracie and I were instantly on the same page. After wrapping up our photo shoot earlier that day, we decided to doll ourselves up. The makeup artist had even snapped a couple of pictures of me during the shoot, gushing, "You're the most stunning client I've ever worked with. Can I post one of these on my social media?" "Sure, but only a side profile," I replied cautiously. "No problem," she assured me, quickly uploading a side shot of me to her feed. That evening, dressed to the nines in tight bodycon dresses and sky-high heels, Gracie and I made our grand entrance at the bar. My hair was styled in soft waves, and Gracie, despite being nearly 50, looked every bit as radiant and youthful as ever. Years of pampering had kept her beauty intact. Under the dim lights, we settled into a plush booth. The manager, recognizing us as VIP guests, brought out a lineup of male models for us to choose from. I tossed a stack of cash onto the table with a smirk. "Bring us the best. Don't waste my time with duds." The manager quickly ushered the most striking newcomers to the front. I leaned back, assessing them critically. "Is this all? Weren't there supposed to be a couple of exceptional ones?" Gracie fiddled with the diamond ring on her finger, her face lighting up as the manager said confidently, "Don't worry, they'll be here in no time." I nodded reluctantly, but as we waited, there was no sign of anyone. I sighed in disappointment. Looks like this place isn't as great as they claim. The service is inconsistent. Just as the words left my mouth, two figures appeared at the entrance. Their silhouettes felt oddly familiar, though their faces were hidden behind masks. Their well-tailored suits exuded an air of elegance, and I couldn't help but sit up straighter, intrigued. "Ms. Olivia, these are the treasures of our establishment," the manager announced proudly. I waved him off, and he quickly retreated, leaving us alone. The two men stepped into the room, their gazes locking onto Gracie and me. A faint smirk curled at their lips, sending an inexplicable chill down my spine. Something felt off. My heartbeat faltered. "Mom," I whispered cautiously, "do they seem strange to you?" Gracie tilted her head, squinting at them. "Handsome, sure. But Liv, they look familiar." Before I could process her words, one of the men stepped forward and wrapped me in his arms. His scent, crisp and woodsy like cedar, washed over me, making my heart skip a beat. "Liv? So what do you think? Happy with what you see?" That voice, that unmistakable voice. My mind went blank and my body stiffened. With trembling hands, I reached up to pull off his mask. His piercing almond-shaped eyes met mine, their playful glint making me dizzy with disbelief. "Ethan!" My voice cracked as the realization hit. He smirked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Well done, Olivia. Sneaking off with my mother to live it up. Had your fun yet?" Before I could respond, the other man, none other than Victor, removed his mask and shot Gracie a dark glare. "Grace, care to explain yourself?" His voice was sharp, each word laced with disbelief and simmering anger. Gracie, however, promptly rolled her eyes and fainted in the most dramatic fashion. I wanted to faint too. I really did. But before I could even think about it, Ethan grabbed my wrist, his hand moving to cradle the back of my head. He leaned down and kissed me. I shoved him away, wiping my lips furiously as my face darkened with anger. "Don't touch me," I hissed, glaring at him. "Isn't Scarlett keeping you company? What's this sudden urge to play the devoted husband? Who do you think you're fooling?" Ethan chuckled, but there was no humor in his tone. "There's no Scarlett," I scoffed, crossing my arms. "Don't lie to me. I've seen it all, the photos, the reporters. How long do you plan to keep up this charade?" His eyes softened, but his smirk deepened. "What's this? Jealous? Jealous? Of you? Get lost." I snapped, my voice trembling with rage. Vic, meanwhile, had scooped the unconscious Gracie into his arms. "Ethan," he said coldly, "deal with your mess. We'll handle ours." With that, he strode out of the room with Gracie in tow. I moved to follow them, but Ethan blocked my path, his arm firm around my shoulders as he steered me toward the exit. The bar owner looked like he wanted to intervene, but one icy glare from Ethan was enough to send him scurrying away. Ethan dragged me to a nearby guest house, my protests falling on deaf ears. "Let go of me," I shouted, struggling against him. "I have guests waiting." Ethan smirked, unfazed. "The guest is me. I booked the entire place." I froze, stunned. Of course, I should have known. Who else would be extravagant enough to rent out an entire guest house for a month? He brought me into one of the rooms, loosening his tie as he stood before me with his hands on his hips. I hated to admit it, but he looked good, too good. Broad shoulders, a lean waist. It was distracting. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to look away. "What do you want, Ethan?" "Funny," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I should be the one asking you that. Faking your death? Dragging my mother into this mess? You've got guts, Olivia." I let out a bitter laugh. "And what choice did I have? You bought Scarlett a whole building. A cheating husband has no right to question me." I turned to leave, but he grabbed me, shoving me onto the bed. His hands pinned mine above my head, his grip unyielding. "Liv," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "There's nothing between Scarlett and me. It's not what you think." I glared at him, fury coursing through me. "Don't lie to me. I saw her push me off that cliff and you still bailed her out of jail. And you dare claim there's nothing? You're nothing but a liar." Summoning all my strength, I kicked him in the leg, forcing him to release me. I bolted for the door, only to be stopped by his bodyguards. "Ma'am," one of them said politely but firmly, "Mr. Ethan instructed us not to let you leave." I turned back to glare at Ethan, who was leaning against the doorframe, his expression unreadable. "You can't keep me here," I growled, my fists clenching at my sides. He smirked, his voice calm yet cutting. "You're free to try. But if you do, don't expect your family to get off scot-free." My breath caught. I hadn't contacted my family since I left, too afraid to drag them into this mess. Now Ethan was using them as leverage. "You're despicable," I spat, my voice shaking with anger. "Call it what you want," he said with a shrug. "But both you and my mother need to face the consequences of what you've done." "Ethan!" I screamed, my frustration boiling over. If you dare touch my family, I'll... He cut me off with a lazy wave of his hand. Save it, Olivia. Come on. Let's talk like adults. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Fine. Let's talk. But don't think for a second that I'm afraid of you. As Ethan led me down the hall, my thoughts drifted to Gracie. Was she okay? I glanced toward one of the upstairs rooms, where muffled noises could be heard. Ethan noticed and quickly covered my eyes with his hand. Don't worry about them, he said. No matter what, my father would never hurt the woman he married. I slapped his hand away, my face full of disdain. You and your father are two peas in a pod. One keeps a mistress and has an illegitimate child, while the other keeps a woman and even buys her a whole building. Ethan, do you even realize your position isn't secure? That illegitimate child of your father's will definitely come back to fight you for the inheritance. Ethan looked at me with suspicion. An illegitimate child fighting for the inheritance? Olivia, have you been reading too many novels? Spending all day with my mom? What nonsense have you picked up from her? And to think you're supposed to be a top graduate from a prestigious university. I glared at him fiercely. These are all things you and your father did, so why are you blaming me for calling it out? Olivia, there's something seriously wrong with your head. My dad doesn't have an illegitimate child, and my relationship with Scarlett isn't what you think it is. I'll believe that when pigs fly. Sure, it's not. Keep denying it. Even the reporters saw it. Let me ask you this. When it was clearly her who pushed me and Gracie down the stairs, why did you bail her out? And that building, didn't you pay for it? Answer me. Yes or no? Ethan sighed, exasperated. Yes. Then that's that. I spread my hands. Since that's the case, let's get divorced. Divorce? Are you serious? Of course. I don't want to live like this anymore. The man I want is someone who's wholeheartedly devoted to me, not someone who flirts around. There's no room for a third party in our marriage. Ethan gave me a peculiar look. Scarlett is just an up-and-coming actress under my film company. I'm helping her land roles to make money. That building? It's under your name. I froze, caught off guard by his words. Ethan, worried I wouldn't believe him, pulled out his phone to show me some photos. The building was purchased under your name. I told Scarlett that she could live there as long as she wanted, but that's all there is to it. Do you understand? I don't understand. All I know is that in public, you treat her with such care and let her flaunt herself as the third Mrs. Choi. I shot him a sharp glare. We're getting divorced. From now on, you can keep whoever you want, and it'll have nothing to do with me. As soon as I finished speaking, a loud shout came from the room next door. It was Gracie. Don't lie to me. That woman is practically parading her child in front of me. Victor, we've been through thick and thin together since we were young. Is this how you repay me? That child is already 16. How much longer do you plan to deceive me? A loud bang followed as Gracie stormed out of the room, tears streaming from her eyes. She grabbed my hand tightly. Let's go. Don't bother with them. I hesitated. But Mom, the guests who booked the inn for a month. It's them. What? Gracie was visibly stunned, clearly not expecting this. She quickly exclaimed, how unlucky. Refund them and kick them out. Victor came out from the room. We don't want the money. Grace, listen to me. Let me explain. I don't want to hear it. Let's get divorced. Liv, find me a lawyer. If mediation doesn't work, we'll file a lawsuit. Gracie and I exchanged a determined glance. We had already resolved to end this once and for all. Hearing her words, Vic clutched his chest, his face pale. Grace, you don't believe me. He swayed unsteadily, and Gracie scoffed. Stop pretending. Let me tell you. Before she could finish, Vic collapsed to the ground with a thud. Gracie immediately screamed, Victor, wake up. "Ethan, you useless boy, what are you standing there for? Your dad just fainted. Call an ambulance." Ethan panicked and rushed to take him to the hospital. I followed closely behind. Gracie paced anxiously in the hallway outside the emergency room. Watching her, I couldn't help but ask, "Mom, it seems like you still care about him." "Who says that? I'm just worried that if he dies here in our inn, how are we supposed to keep running our business?" She had a point. I nodded in agreement. If he died in our guest house, we'd never be able to continue operating it. Seeing her stubborn expression, I couldn't help but sigh. Ethan, standing nearby, muttered in a low voice, "Where do you all even get your gossip from? Things that don't exist. You just insist on making them up. Don't try to fool me. That woman's name is Fiona, and her son is 16. He's practically a carbon copy of your dad. You ungrateful boy. I carried you for 9 months, and now you're siding with your father." Gracie shot him a sharp glare. Just as Ethan was about to explain, Vic stirred awake on the hospital bed. He reached out weakly to grab Gracie's hand. "Grace, don't leave me." Gracie looked thoroughly unimpressed. The doctor stepped in and said, "The patient must remain calm. Emotional stress could trigger a brain hemorrhage. It's best if family members stay with him." Reluctantly, Gracie decided to stay. She turned to me and said, "Liv, go get some rest." "Mom, I'll be in the next room. If anything happens, just call me." "I can't possibly leave Gracie here alone," I murmured to myself as I turned and went to the next room. It was just Ethan and me now. He was about to say something when his phone rang. Ethan frowned and pressed the decline button impatiently, but not before I caught a glimpse of the name on the screen, Scarlett. "Answer it," I said with a cold smile. "If you don't, she'll be heartbroken." Ethan hesitated for a moment. The phone kept ringing relentless. Finally, with a sigh of resignation, he answered. The moment he did, his expression changed dramatically. "What did you just say?" he gasped. I scoffed, the sound dripping with sarcasm. "What a performance. Bravo." Without saying another word, I turned to the window, staring out at the world beyond. The vast blue sky stretched endlessly above, while the lights of the distant city flickered faintly, like whispers in the dark. From the adjacent room, I could hear the muffled sounds of Gracie and Vic talking. It seemed they were deep in conversation, perhaps attempting to reconcile their differences. But as for Ethan and me, there was no hope left. "Liv, wait here for me," Ethan said suddenly, his voice tense. "Something's come up and I need to take care of it. I'll be back soon." Before I could respond, he was already rushing out the door, leaving behind a pair of bodyguards to keep an eye on me. I let out a bitter laugh, the weight of disappointment sinking deep into my chest. Moments later, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Scarlett. "Miss Olivia, there's nothing between Ethan and me. Please don't misunderstand." The text read. I stared at her words, my lips curling into a mocking smile. Green tea behavior at its finest. But then a chilling thought struck me. How did she know I was still alive? Not only that, but how had she managed to get my new number? Before I could dwell on it further, a soft, pitiful voice echoed from outside the room. "Sister, please don't hold this against me. I know you're upset, but I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Besides, he's also Ethan's child. Leo, kneel down and apologize to your aunt right now." Gracie's sharp voice cut through the tension like a blade. There was a thud as the boy dropped to his knees, but Gracie's anger remained unbridled. "Who are you calling aunt? You shameless woman." Alarmed, I rushed out of the room, only to find a frail-looking woman kneeling on the floor with a young boy beside her. Gracie's eyes were red with fury. "Are you out of your mind?" I snapped, stepping between them and pushing the woman aside. "You came all the way here just to stake your claim?" Turning to the bodyguards, I barked, "Get them out of here. Now." But just as they moved forward, the boy took a defiant step toward me. What are you doing? You're not allowed to bully my mom. My voice rose sharp with indignation. It was your mom who bullied mine first. We glared at each other like two roosters in a fight. Fiona, the woman whose face was a mix of awkwardness and guilt, broke the silence. I only came to check on things. I had no other intentions. I scoffed. You disrupted Gracie and Vic leave. Immediately. Despite my words, they didn't leave. Instead, they stepped aside, lingering near the doorway awkwardly. From inside the hospital room, Vic's voice called out, calm but firm. Let them in. I clenched my fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. Gracie, however, remained composed. She patted my hand reassuringly and glanced at her phone, occupied with a message exchange I couldn't decipher. Once inside, Fiona spoke in a trembling voice, but the sound of muffled sobs soon followed. Gracie and I exchanged a look, her expression filled with disdain. Pathetic, she muttered under her breath. I nodded in agreement, but my thoughts wandered back to Scarlett. By the way, Mom, I said, suddenly remembering. Scarlett seems to know I'm alive. She even sent me a message just now. I handed her my phone. Gracie's face froze for a moment as she read, but before she could respond, the door opened. Grace, Liv, come in, Victor called out. Together we entered the room. Victor lay in the hospital bed, his face pale but calm. Let me introduce you. This is Fiona. I know who she is. I cut him off, my tone icy. No need for introductions. That's your illegitimate child, isn't it? You've got it wrong, Victor said, his voice steady but tired. Fiona stepped forward. The child belongs to the Choi family, yes. But he's not Victor's son. He's Ethan's late brother, Ruben's. What? Gracie exclaimed, her voice tinged with disbelief. Ruben's been dead for years. Victor sighed, as though steeling himself for what was to come. He left behind a child, he explained. Fiona's voice cracked as she continued. I've been raising him in the countryside, but it's been so difficult. That's why I came to find the Choi family. She glanced at Leo, her eyes brimming with maternal pride. He's a bright boy excelling in school. But staying with me will only hold him back. Her tone turned pleading. Mrs. Choi, I know you misunderstand me, but I have no other choice. Please take Leo and Deanna. I'm begging you. Leo spoke up then, his voice fierce and unwavering. Mom, I'll stay with you no matter what. I don't care if we have to eat scraps. I'm not going anywhere. I studied the boy more closely. His school uniform was modest, a testament to their struggles. It hit me then, this was Ruben's child. Why hadn't Vic explained this earlier? Victor let out a weary sigh. Fiona and I have only met twice. I sent her $10,000 to help with expenses, but Gracie found out and wouldn't let it go. I planned to explain everything at the birthday gathering, he continued, but things spiraled out of control. I had no choice but to bring Fiona and Leo here to clear the air. He held up a document. This is the paternity test Ruben had done before he passed. So that was the truth. Gracie had assumed Fiona was Victor's mistress, but this revelation changed everything. I was stunned into silence. Victor looked at me and said softly, Liv, take them out for now. Grace, stay. I need to speak with you privately. Gracie's expression faltered for a moment, but I squeezed her hand gently. Say what you need to. I'm on your side, I reassured her. She nodded, and I led Fiona and Leo out of the room. Once we were outside, I turned to them, my tone apologetic. I'm sorry. It seems there's been a misunderstanding. It's nothing really. It was my mistake. I should have contacted Mrs. Choi directly. Leo looks so much like his father. No wonder Mrs. Choi misunderstood. But what's going on between you and Ethan? He doesn't seem like the kind of man to mess around. The mention of Ethan made my blood boil. He still hadn't come home. I'll take you to the hotel to rest first. It's late, and whatever needs to be discussed can wait until tomorrow. Fiona nodded, and I drove them to a nearby hotel to get them checked in. Afterward, I called Ethan, but to my surprise, Scarlett answered. Where's Ethan? Miss Olivia, Ethan's in the shower. Call back later, okay? And with that, she hung up. My fists clenched in anger. That bastard. How dare he lie to me? I was seething, my teeth grinding in frustration. I wanted nothing more than to drag him back and demand an explanation. But why should I let him control the situation? I summoned the bodyguards. Find Ethan. If you don't, you're all fired. They didn't dare waste time and immediately set out. I also contacted my lawyer and instructed him to check if the property in Shun City was under my name. If it was, I wanted him to notify Scarlett to pack her things and get out. Why should my house be used to shelter another woman? The lawyer worked quickly and confirmed that the property was indeed mine. With that, I gave the order for Scarlett to vacate immediately. As expected, Scarlett exploded. She called me almost instantly. Olivia, what the hell are you doing? Are you trying to drive me to the edge? Isn't this what you wanted? If you're going to steal my man, you'd better be ready for the consequences. You have 1 day to leave my house. I hung up and blocked her number, leaving her to stew in her own panic. An hour later, the bodyguards returned with Ethan in tow. His face was flushed and he clung to me, refusing to let go. Liv, I only want Liv, he murmured. Ma'am, one of the bodyguards explained. He was drugged. When we found him, Scarlett was undressing him and trying to take photos. Hearing this, I was furious. Where is she? We brought her here. With a thud, Scarlett was shoved to her knees in front of me. Her hair was a mess, and there were red marks on her face, evidence of the slap she'd received. She looked utterly disheveled. Gritting her teeth, she sneered. I was so close. Olivia, you're lucky. Even drugged, he still thinks about you. I raised my hand and slapped her hard across the face. Who do you think you are to try and take my man? Watch her closely. Make sure she moves out of that house, and blacklist her everywhere. The bodyguards nodded and dragged Scarlett out. I took Ethan to the medical room, where the doctor gave him an 4-drip to flush the drugs out of his system. Once the effects of the drug wore off, he'd be fine. As I was about to leave, Ethan grabbed my hand. Liv, don't go. It's my fault, don't leave me. He was drowsy but still managed to apologize. Looking at his flushed face, I sighed and patted his hand. I won't go. I'm staying. Ethan clung to my hand tightly. I stayed by his side until late into the night, eventually dozing off. In my half-asleep state, I felt a chill and instinctively moved closer to the warmth beside me. When I woke up, I heard a man's amused voice above me. Liv, I knew you couldn't resist me. Flustered, I immediately pulled away, my face turning red. I tried to get up, but he held me tightly. Wife, he said with a grin, you still care about me. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come to get me. You're amazing. I took a deep breath, exasperated. How did Scarlett even manage to drug you? You must have given her the chance. I swear, Liv, I didn't. Scarlett called me, saying she had photos of you and was blackmailing me for $2 million. I had no choice but to meet her. I didn't expect her to pull something like this. Ethan leaned in and kissed my forehead. Thank you, Liv. You saved me. Scarlett won't get away with this, he added, his tone darkening. Hearing this, I couldn't help but ask, didn't you say she was supposed to be helping you make money? Did she turn against you because of love? I never loved her, Ethan replied firmly. She was just involved with Ray, the CEO of Yuanyang Tech. I tolerated her for Ray's sake. But now? She's crossed the line. She'll regret it. Good, I said. I've already had her evicted. Ethan pulled me into a tight hug. Well done, wife. I patted his cheek. All right, let go. People will laugh if they see us like this. Oh, by the way, I added, Leo is actually your uncle's child. Ethan froze for a moment before realization dawned on him. Leo? Fiona's son? That explains everything. I knew my dad couldn't have done those things. Liv, don't scare me like that again. You don't know how close my dad and I came to ending it all. I didn't respond, letting him bury his head in my arms. Sighing, I wrapped my arms around him in return. Once Ethan recovered, Gracie and Vic reconciled as well. We brought Fiona and her son back home with us. Somehow, the reporters got wind of the story and swarmed us as soon as we arrived. I glanced out the window, lowering my voice as I asked, how did Scarlett find out where I was? And how did you manage to find me? Ethan smirked. My beautiful wife made quite the splash online with that photo of you wearing the floral hairpin. Who wouldn't recognize you? Scarlett got here ahead of me. She was following you, taking pictures in secret. Of course she knew where you were. So that's how it happened. The makeup artist had taken a photo of me and shared it online. I hadn't paid attention at the time. Ethan must have seen it and chased after me all the way here. But now, with all these reporters swarming around, I had no idea how to handle the situation. Ethan held my hand tightly while Vic shielded Gracie. To the outside world, they announced that Gracie and I had narrowly escaped disaster and spent 6 months recuperating before returning home. When the photo of me with the floral hairpin went viral, the internet quickly pieced the story together. They discovered I had been running a guest house at a tourist spot. What recuperation? That's clearly a vacation. Did their marriage fall apart? And Scarlett? I heard she got kicked out. Is this a victory for the original wife? Fun fact. Scarlett was the mistress who tried to stir up trouble. When the Crane family took over Yuanyang Tech, Scarlett lost all her leverage and got booted out. Imaginary corporate warfare. Stock market battles. Real corporate warfare. The wife jumping into the sea. Reading these comments, I couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. The rumors about my family weren't without impact, though the Crane men, father and son, acted swiftly to wipe them off the internet completely. One afternoon, Gracie and I sat in the garden enjoying tea. She slid a card across the table to me. Mom, what's this? I asked, puzzled. Whatever you don't spend, give it back to me later. I'll ask him for more next time. That old man bawled his eyes out over this. If I don't spend his money, he'll start suspecting I'm planning to leave him. Her words left me speechless and a bit amused. I could only accept the card with a resigned smile. Live men need a sense of crisis. That's how a woman maintains her position. Tonight, let's hit the bar. What do you say? Her suggestion stunned me for a moment. I stared at her as she winked at me. Before I knew it, I burst out laughing. Sure. Why not? I gave her an enthusiastic thumbs up. The two of us, mother and daughter-in-law, were suddenly a team. That evening, Gracie urged Vic to attend a banquet. I shoved Ethan along to accompany him, warning him to keep an eye out and make sure no unwanted guests showed up. With the men occupied, Gracie and I slipped away to a bar for some fun. I have to say, the nightlife in Shin City was on another level. Whether it was the quality or the sheer number of bars, it far outshone the tourist area where I ran my guest house. I watched as men on stage danced with unabashed energy, occasionally leaning down to tease the crowd. The air was thick with testosterone. One of them even approached me, inviting me to touch his abs. My face flushed bright red. Gracie, meanwhile, was laughing so hard she could barely catch her breath. Don't be shy. You paid to be here. Might as well enjoy the perks. Tentatively, I reached out a hand, but before I could make contact, another hand shot out of nowhere, grabbing my wrist in a firm grip. Ethan! I gasped, completely stunned. Just as I registered his presence, Vic appeared and pulled Gracie into his arms. What's this? Couldn't get enough at home, so you came here for the show. Vic teased. Let me explain. Gracie protested. I turned to Ethan, blinking in confusion. Weren't you supposed to be at the banquet? I was, but then I noticed someone's location pin drop here. I knew you two were up to something. His words left me chuckling nervously. Ethan raised an eyebrow, and before I could say anything else, he scooped me up and carried me out. Behind us, Gracie was being just as tightly held by Vic. She and I exchanged a helpless look, but in the end, there was no choice but to leave with our respective husbands. Back at home, I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret for the money we'd spent. We'd barely been at the bar for 2 minutes before getting dragged away. Ethan noticed my expression and frowned. What's wrong? Don't tell me you're upset about it. I froze. What? Of course not. Why would I care about that? Good. Because I've decided to give you a little punishment. You won't have time to look at anyone else. His cryptic words made me nervous, and I tried to explain further, but he silenced me with a kiss. That night, he didn't let up for a second. By the time morning came, I was exhausted, aching from head to toe. It wasn't until a year later, when I gave birth to our child, that I finally understood what he'd meant by punishment. Leaning against the headboard, I watched Ethan gently rock the baby to sleep. A wave of warmth washed over me. Sweetheart, I've got a gift for you to celebrate the baby's 100th day, he said suddenly. I instinctively started to refuse, but before I could, he handed me a contract. This film company is now under your name. I've signed a bunch of young, handsome actors. You can look all you want, but no touching. Ethan, I love you to pieces, I exclaimed, throwing myself at him and smothering him in kisses. He laughed, pulling me into his embrace. In that moment, happiness seemed to wrap itself around me like a cocoon. And then I remembered, oh right, let's not forget about Gracie.